So, how many of you have ever had a good idea? Some? It's the worst thing that ever happened, right? Like I feel whenever I have a good idea, it's amazing, but it's also very scary because I can't control when it happens. Like I feel every good idea I've ever had, I've been convinced is the last good idea I ever have, and it feels like an actual miracle. And I find this very stressful way to live. Like I don't like just having to wait for it. And I don't think you can't, I think with good ideas, you can't just will them into existence. They don't keep regular office hours. You can't just be like, today's the day I find the idea. And as someone who has to do this for a living, it does drive me crazy. So I was trying to figure out if there's a way that if you could make the process more systematic, if there was any way to harness it. And so I thought, I don't think there's a way to figure out when the ideas will come, but maybe you can figure out where the ideas come from. So I want to start by telling you about an idea that my friend Noel had in 2003. He was living in Virginia, and he was working for an ad agency. And everyone there, they wanted to work on really flashy ads by Apple and Gatorade. And what was not flashy at the time was insurance. They definitely didn't want to work on insurance. And there was this company that no one had heard of called Geico that wanted to do wanted to do a campaign about how to show that it was really easy to sign up for their insurance. And all the copywriters feared this campaign and literally would run away when they would see the clients in the hall. And Noel must not have run fast enough, or he got caught, and he must have come out of the bathroom maybe and seen the client. And the Geico ad landed on his desk, and he was totally bummed, and he was stuck with this campaign. And so him and his team would get together, and they would brainstorm about how to make insurance not boring somehow, and how to convey why it would be so easy to sign up for this service. And they had none of the ideas seemed right. They had an idea where maybe they could have a baby that wasn't potty trained but could still fill out the insurance forms, and it just seemed very messy and not streamlined. And they would just brainstorm, and nothing was coming to them. And then when Noel would go home, he was reading this book by the writer George Saunders called Pastoralia, and he really liked this. This made him feel really good. And the title story is about a amusement park. It's kind of set in no time, this book. And the title story was in this amusement park, and there's different exhibits to show how different people live. There's a wise mountain hermit exhibit and stuff like that. And then the main exhibit is this, or what the story focuses on, is about a caveman, a cave husband and cave wife. And they're played by two actors, but they live in there. They do everything. They never leave. They eat, they sleep. Their actual lives are playing these cavemen and cave wife and cave husband. And it's a really funny, great story. And Noel really liked it. And then he would go back to work, and he'd try to figure out this campaign, and everybody was just blocked, and their brains needed to rest. And one day they broke for lunch, and Noel sat down to eat, and suddenly it just came to him. He thought of the caveman, and he said, "That's it." And he thought, it's so easy, a caveman can do it. The whole slogan came to him fully formed, and he knew that was the right one. And then that became the commercial that you guys are probably all thinking of in your head right now. And it just was that, it was a direct line from reading this story to coming up with that campaign, which I find amazing. I feel when I first saw that campaign, I never would have thought, oh, George Saunders was inadvertently responsible for that. So then I was like, so if George Saunders inspired that, maybe who's George Saunders inspired by? What inspired the inspiration? So I called George Saunders up to ask him, and he was really great. And we talked about a lot of inspirations, and he told me a story about how when he was first starting off as a writer, he only read dead authors. And he liked Hemingway, and he liked Norman Mailer, and he refused to read any contemporary fiction. Anything that was written by someone alive, he wasn't interested in. And he was sure he was right, and he could just dismiss it without having how to look at it. But then one day he was just I guess if I'm gonna say that it's all terrible, I should read some of it. So he decided to he made this plan where he went to the Chicago Public Library. He was living in Chicago, and he went to the big library. And he took a stack of 15 journals. And his plan was he would read all the journals, dismiss everything would be bad, and then he could go back and be wanting to write like Hemingway again. So he opened up the first journal, and he read a story, and it was bad, and he was really relieved, and he was like, of course, I knew it. And then he turned to another story, and it was a story called Hot Ice by a writer named Stuart Dybek. And as soon as he started reading it, George Saunders started to sweat, his face turned red, he got really panicky, and by the time he was done, something had changed, and that night he went home and started writing in the style that George Saunders his style. He found his voice that night after reading this story. And he said it was just like that. It was instant connection, direct line of inspiration. So then I found that amazing. So then I was like, well, I have to call up Stuart Dybek then to see how far it goes. So I called him up, and he was fishing at the time. And he was like, yes, of course I have a moment of inspiration. And he said that he was really obsessed with writing like the realists. Like he liked Saul Bellow and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he kind of writes these stories that they're connected to reality, but they're also like they're kind of fantastical. And he said when he was 25, he always wrote while listening to music, and when he was 25, he went to the same library in Chicago, the exact same one that George Saunders would later go to. And he was really into these Hungarian composers named Kodály and Bartók. And he checked out this recording they had done called Cello, Unaccompanied Sonata for Cello. And he took it home, and he put it on, and the minute the music played, he started writing furiously, and then he like filled 3 or 4 pages, and he looked down, and he had written in a voice he didn't know he had, in a style he didn't know he knew how to do, and he said the music instantly opened up everything for him, and then he became the writer that he became. So that was very inspiring to me, and I would have called up more people, but then people started to not be alive anymore. So I then had to research and dig up stuff, not bodies, just stories of inspiration. And it turns out that Kodály and Bartók, they were really inspired by Debussy and the composer Debussy. And then Debussy was really inspired by the poet Baudelaire. And Baudelaire was like extremely inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe, actually the Raven, right? The Raven turns out to be inspired by a bird in a Dickens story called Barnaby Rudge that Poe hadn't even liked. He'd panned it, but he was super inspired by this bird. And then that bird in that Dickens story was actually inspired by Dickens' real-life pet, Raven, named Grip. But Grip, sadly, died from eating paint chips before anyone could get on record what he was inspired by. So it kind of ends there. So Geico to Dickens. So I feel like when I learned all this, the bad news is I guess there's no getting around the waiting for the inspiration to come. But even though it doesn't make the creative process more easier to control, it does make it feel less lonely because all these ideas are strung together through history. And also it kind of makes it feel like I'm living in an action movie now because like inspiration, like watch out, inspiration can strike at any second. And you just have to be ready to act on it when it does.